Good morning, my dear students. Am I audible to you? Okay, thank you. Welcome to the Global Positioning Systems class. And some of you have mentioned some topics from Unit 3 to be revised. Of course, they are, of course, the very important topics, I say. Of course, entire Unit 3 we will revise today, not a problem. And I will stress upon these things. That is what you mentioned is so you mentioned like antenna design choices, that is receiver design choices, receiver architecture. First topic is, second topic is receiver design choices, and the third topic is the rubidium atomic clock. Okay, so receiver architecture and receiver design choices, of course, very frequently asked, and the rubidium atomic clock is one of the clock that is used in the GPS system. Okay, we will revise all the topics for today. So please be attentive. It is already 10:39. 86 members have joined till now, and people are still joining. Right. So I think I have insisted you to draw this block diagram of a generalized GPS receiver. Of course, to specific applications, it may slightly differ, but most of the times these blocks are compulsory. And some new features may be added to this block diagram. Have you drawn this diagram? If not, once again, you draw the same diagram. It gives you more practice. It takes hardly 2 to 3 minutes. So to draw the diagram, I'll continue my explanation. Right? So from understanding the basics of the global positioning system, we came to know that the GPS receiver is a passive only system. The GPS receiver is a passive only system. That is, it is not going to transmit any signals. Rather, it is just receiving the signals that are sent by the satellite from the GPS constellation. And we have studied in our previous units what does that GPS signal is consisting of. That we call it as a navigation message. So the navigation message that is carried by a GPS signal, what are the various parts of it? How many frames does it consist of? And how many subframes does it consist of? How many words does it consist of? And each word is of how many bits? And how to identify the start of a frame or end of a frame. Start of a frame and as well as the end of a frame. Now this signal is received not in the digital form. It is received in the form of an analog signal, which is modulated with some L1 carrier and L2 carriers. Of course, modulated by the pseudo-random noise codes, that is C by A code and P code. Right? Now it is receiving, it has been sent by a transmitter, that is by a space vehicle or simply a satellite in the constellation in the form of an RF signal, and that has traveled through the ionosphere, troposphere, and through the, of course, Earth's atmosphere, and it is intended to be received by a GPS receiver. It is intended to be received by a GPS receiver. And how the receiver should be designed, what should be the architecture of that receiver? This is the general block diagram or architecture of the GPS receiver. See, a receiver, even though it was said a passive system, but there are so many active elements in this which are confined to the receiver. Of course, everything, it is now in the form of integrated circuits. So these many blocks may be present at the tip of a finger, because the integration technology in a very large scale, we call as VLSI technology. The VLSI technology has brought down the sizes of the electronics devices and electronics circuits. Even these many blocks may come into a tip of a finger. So such a small the GPS receiver is. In spite of small size, it is intended to do several tasks. It is intended to do several tasks. Of course, in the very previous unit, we have already studied this. Now coming to the understanding of the block diagram of the GPS receiver or the GPS architecture. Of course, it is analogous to our conventional receivers. It is analogous to our conventional receivers. Whenever we say a receiver's function is to receive the signal, that is the modulated signal which was transmitted by the transmitter, and to demodulate that. Signal, and if any post-processing is required, that post-processing will be done before it is sending it to the final destination, before delivering it to the final destination. And these are the things that we expect from a normal receiver. Of course, the GPS receiver is also doing the same things. The GPS receiver is also doing the same things. So first of all, the RF signal is received by a receiving antenna. So first element in the receiver is a receiving antenna. So every GPS receiver is coming with some type of receiving antenna. So what are those types of receiving antenna? We will discuss it after 4 to 5 slides. That's a different thing. But now, to understand, a receiving antenna is required to receive a RF signal. Now, after receiving, what it should do? It should be before it is digitized. This is in the form of analog, but original modulation signal D of t is in the form of digital. So it has to be converted into the digital form. So absolutely we need an analog to digital converter. So this block, the rightmost block in the first line is the analog to digital converter. You can take any type of ADCs that you have studied in your previous semester, like flash ADC or comparator type ADC, or any A to D converter you can take, whichever is suitable for this application. But before that, the RF signal that is received is at a higher frequency, 1575 megahertz if it is a L1 signal, and it is 1227 megahertz if it is a L2 signal. L2 carrier is used. Now, that much frequency cannot be converted directly, cannot be given as the input directly to the A to D converter. The processing will become more complex. So before feeding it to the A to D converter, the frequency down conversion is done. Of course, in any conventional receiver, it is the thing. And the frequency down conversion is done in the 2 stages. And before that, there is a radio frequency stage, RF stage. So what do we do in the RF stage? The entire modulated signal may not be required. See, if you draw the frequency spectrum, the side lobes will be there. The side lobes will have a very less power, and they can be noisy. If you take all those components into picture, the signal reception will become some more difficult. So that it is to be given to a filter. So what type of filter we have to choose here? We cannot choose a low pass filter. We cannot choose a high pass filter. We have to choose a band pass filter, because the bandwidth is which the range of frequencies over which the gain is above the 3 decibels. The gain is above the 3 decibels. So there are lower cutoff frequencies and also the higher cutoff frequencies. Those components are to be eliminated, and for that purpose we have chosen a band pass filter. After passing through the band pass filter, because the signal has traveled over a longer distance, it may be attenuated. So a minimum amplification is required here before its frequency down conversion, because the signal has to be properly fed to a mixer. So that the second block is the amplifier. The second block is the amplifier. Whatever the type of amplifier that gives best amplification without any signal distortion, you can choose here. Once the amplification is done, we are going for the intermediate frequency stage. So IF stage stands for the intermediate frequency stage. So intermediate frequency stage is the process of frequency down conversion. Of course, the frequency down conversion process is done in two stages. Of course, that's why there are two intermediate frequency stages. First intermediate frequency stage and second intermediate frequencies. In both the stages, the frequency down conversion is taking place, not at a single one. So what is IF stage consisting of? It is consisting of a mixer, band pass filter, and followed by the final amplifier. So first the signal is given to a mixer. So whenever it is a mixer, minimum two inputs are required. So one input is our RF signal, which is received, and another signal is coming from a reference oscillator. And the reference oscillator will generate a signal which is similar to a carrier that was used in the modulation process, and it, after frequency synthesizing, it will be given to the mixer as another input. When these two signals are mixed, the carrier will be eliminated and the information bearing signal will be coming out. And again that will be passed through the band pass filter and it will be amplified. If the process of down conversion is not sufficient, we are going to the down conversion in the one more stage, that is in the second stage. So that the signal is given to a second mixer, the same local oscillator frequency signal frequency carrier is given as another input for the second mixer, and the output of the mixer is given to a band pass filter followed by the amplification. Now it is ready for digital conversion. So this input may be given to one A to D converter, analog to digital converter. Now this signal will be converted into the form of digital by taking the help of a frequency synthesizer. Another input for the A to D converter is a frequency synthesizer. The frequency is to be synthesized. Then the digitized IF signal will be coming. Of course, up to this will be the procedure for any normal receiver. But from these two blocks are exclusively specific for the GPS receiver. These GPS receivers will contain these two blocks. The GPS receivers will contain these two blocks, which are not there for a normal receiver. Please note this point. So here, the digitized signal is given as the input for the post-processing units. So these two units are the post-processing units, and which will take the inputs of the frequency synthesizer, and if there are any interrupts, that also will be given as the interrupts, because when the process is going on, some emergency service may come, that may be called as an interrupt. So keeping these in mind, it has to do some major tasks. Of course, in a previous class in Unit 2, we have already learned this. So first is the code acquisition or tracking. Carrier acquisition or tracking. So first, from the received signal, it has to detect for the code, which type of code is used. Then carrier acquisition and tracking is to be done. Then message bit synchronization is to be done. Then navigation message demodulation is done. Here. So demodulation is the process of separating the carrier signal from the modulated signal, so that the modulating signal will result or data signal will result. Once the data signal is resulted, then pseudo range measurements will be done for the case of code and also for the case of the carrier. Then delta range measurements, that is delta X and delta Y, which you have learned in our Unit 1. Delta X and delta Y. Is there any small change is there in the range, that is range of the user. If it is there, that is also to be measured. Then finally it is given to a navigation processing. Of course, here this is done by the Kalman filtering. It is done by the Kalman filtering, where we are coupling the GPS with the INS. So here the external inputs are given like INS input, altimeter input, or Lorentz input, and some other clock aiding techniques. And after Kalman filtering, the final output is the navigation output. The final output is the navigation output, which is giving you clearly the position, velocity, and time, or if any fault or detection and isolation. So user position is detected and that will be isolated by the GPS system. And these information are present in the navigation output, will be given as the navigation outputs of the GPS system. Yes, guys, understood the architecture of the GPS receiver? Or any doubts here? Are you there in the class? Of course, the same thing, whatever we have studied till now is there in the next slides. So front end, frequency down conversion stage in stage 1 and stage 2 with the help of the local oscillator signal frequency. Then signal to noise ratio. So signal to noise ratio is the ratio of the signal power to the noise power, that you know from your previous standards. The ratio of the signal power to the noise power. So it should be always a very, very higher quantity. Ideally speaking, SNR value should be infinity. SNR value infinity means noise power is 0. But is it practically possible? It's not practically possible. So always there is a compromise of the SNR value. So what we should do is, we should ensure that the SNR value is as high as possible. Of course, as usual to your any conventional communication system. So the important aspect of receiver design is the calculation of the signal quality. It is measured by the SNR in the receiver intermediate frequency bandwidth. And the typical bandwidths will range from about 2 megahertz in the low cost receivers to 20 megahertz in a high-end full GPS signals, in high-end units. And the dominant type of noise is the thermal noise here. Of course, there is obviously effect of noise in the GPS signals also, and that noise is a thermal noise. That noise is the thermal noise, and it is a internal noise. It is present in the RF amplifiers, in the first RF amplifiers, and that is present in the receiver's front end. Now there should be an estimator. There should be an estimator to know how much noise will be affecting our signal, and that is given by this formula. Noise power in this bandwidth is given by K into TE into B. So where K is a constant and B is the bandwidth of the signal and T is the effective noise temperature. That means if the temperature is increased by this many degrees, that is equal to the how much noise power, or the temperature is decreased by this much this many degrees, then that is equal to the how much power. So that is a T is a effective noise temperature. Of course, you know all these things from your previous standards. The effective noise temperature is a function of sky noise. So what are affecting this noise temperature? On what factors the TE is dependent is, one is the sky noise, antenna noise temperature, line losses, receiver noise temperature, and also the ambient temperature. Remember these points, very, very important. So effective noise temperature is dependent on sky noise, antenna noise temperature, line losses, receiver noise temperature, and also the ambient temperature. So these factors will affect the effective noise temperature. So these are the deciding factors. And a typical effective noise temperature for a GPS receiver is 513 degrees Kelvin. So this is a nominal calculated value after doing several researches, and this will result in a noise power of about minus 138.5 decibel watts in a 2 megahertz bandwidth and minus 128.5 decibel watts in a 20 megahertz bandwidth. So as the bandwidth is increasing, the noise power is getting decreased. You can note down this point. So for 2 megahertz, it is minus 138.5 decibel watts, and for a 20 megahertz signal, that is 128.5 decibel watts. So these are some typical values. Of course, these may be because of the loss factors that we have studied in our previous class. And the next important point in the receivers is, so we know how the signal is received by a receiver and how it is processed in the different stages. Now, there are some exclusive receiver design choices. There are some exclusive receiver design choices. That is, a receiver has to meet these requirements. A receiver has to meet these requirements when we are choosing a perfect GPS receiver. So that include the number of channels that are used in a receiver and sequencing rate, and there should be a specific capability that is called L2 capability. And sometimes, see, till now what we learned is we are using either of the C by A code or P code in the modulation process. But we are going to learn here, there are some codeless techniques. There are some codeless techniques, and there should be access to the SA signals. SA signals are selective availability signals. Then a receiver must have a differential capability in the name of differential GPS, because that is to augment the GPS process. Next, a receiver must be with pseudo satellite compatibility, and a receiver must be having the immunity to the pseudo light signals. Must have the immunity to the pseudo light signals, and it should able to accept some external aiding inputs. A receiver must accept some external aiding inputs. So these are the receiver design choices. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 receiver design choices are there. This is very, very important question. Please prepare it thoroughly for the external examinations. Okay. Right. Each one we study in detail. So the number of channels and the sequencing rate. So a GPS receiver should be come with not only a single channel, sometimes 2 channels, sometimes 3 channels, sometimes 4 channels, sometimes even 5 or more than that, because it has to receive the signals not only from a single satellite, it has to simultaneously work. So for that purpose, it has to be coming with more than 2 channels. So the channel time has to be shared. That is, here we are expecting a time division multiplexing process. So how that channel time is shared? The first step is select the pseudo random noise code corresponding to the satellite observed. So there are 24 satellites revolving around the Earth, we know that. Among them, signal is received at a time. Then that signal is received from which type of satellite? So that is first to be observed. Satellite is to be selected. Then compute the current state of the code at the state of the dwell based on the state at the end of the last dwell, the signal Doppler and eclipse time since the last dwell. That means that is the previous stage. So what is the signal status at the previous stage and the present stage, and if there is any signal Doppler is there, and also the eclipse time, depending on that, what is the current state of the code, whether it is C by A code received or the P code received. Then the receiver, after knowing this, it will load the code state into the code generator hardware. So every receiver will come with a code generator hardware. after knowing what type of code is used by the RF signal, the same type of code is being generated in the local receiver. Then it will compute the initial Doppler frequency of the phase locked loop reference or frequency locked loop reference. Of course, you might have studied in your LICA subject about PLL and FLL. Then this will load the Doppler frequency into the PLL hardware. This will load the Doppler frequency into the PLL hardware. Then the process of reacquisition will be initiated by turning on the code tracking and carrier tracking loops. So once this Doppler frequency is loaded into the PLL hardware, then reacquisition process will be starting by turning on the code tracking and carrier tracking loops. Then followed by, it determines the when reacquisition has occurred. Reacquisition means when the code is locked and when the frequency is locked or when the phase is locked. PLL is a principle of locking the phase, right? Once this is locking is done, then we can easily measure the range or carrier phase rate during the remainder time. So these are called as the pseudo range measurements or pseudo carrier phase measurement or pseudo carrier phase rate measurement. So this is the process of the time sharing. So step by step procedure. Then we can use a single channel receiver or we can use the multi-channel receivers, of course. So this topic I have already covered. 2-channel receivers or receivers with 3 to 5 channels are available in the market, or sometimes the multi-channel all-in-view receivers. So these are the most sophisticated receivers we'll be using. And next receiver design choice is the L2 capability. The GPS receivers that can utilize the L2 frequency gain several advantages over the L1 only receivers. See here, the GPS receivers may have the capability of L1 only or may come with the L1 and L2. So L2 is having advantages compared to the L1. So what are they? That is, currently the L2 carrier is modulated only with a military encrypted P code. Military encrypted P code, that is called the Y code, and the 50 bits per second data stream. Of course, obviously it is 50 bits per second always. But here it is modulated with a military encrypted P code. That is multiplying the P code with some W code. We learned in our previous unit. And that is called as a Y code. What for it is? This is the encrypted code. This is the encrypted code that is exclusively meant for the military usage. Exclusively meant for the military usage. So if any other civilians are trying to use that, then they will be denied because the decrypting key will be only with the authorized users. Anyone cannot decrypt that encrypted P code. But sometimes it is possible to recover the L2 carrier, which can provide the significant performance gains in certain applications with the permission of the military, that is Department of Defense of US. With the permission, it may be used. And this is dual frequency ionospheric correction. If any ionospheric corrections are there, L1 and L2, both differential we calculate. And improved carrier phase ambiguity resolution in high accuracy differential positioning. There will be improved carrier phase ambiguity resolution. Next, there are code selections are 3 types. One is the C/A code, next one is the P code, and another one is the code less technique. Of course, we know the C/A code, it is with 1.023 megahertz and the chipping rate and 1 millisecond period that permits bandwidth for small pseudo range error due to the thermal noise, and the code is generated by a few relatively small shift registers. Of course, this is not required for us, that will be taken care by the master control station. And chipping rate is here 1023 chips per period, that is per second. Here 1 millisecond is the period of the C/A code, and it is easy to acquire. And military receivers, the direct acquisition of the P code would be extremely difficult and time consuming. So that the second one is the P code. So P code is a 10.23 megahertz chipping rate. Earlier one is 1.023 only, but this is 10.23 megahertz chipping rate, and it has a very long period of 1 week. Of course, all these things we learned very previously in the previous class. And here it is a encrypted P code. Just now we studied. It is using a encrypted P code. Only the specific users can only use this. So usage of this has advantages like improved navigation accuracy. Of course, the major objective of the GPS, improved navigation accuracy without errors, and improved jamming immunity. If there is any signal jamming, that will be improved, and better multipath rejection. Better multipath rejection. If there are multipath propagation of the signals is taking place, then that also will be rejected. And some commercial receivers are coming with the codeless techniques. Some commercial receivers are coming with the codeless techniques. They don't need the help of L1 or they don't need the help of C by A code or P code. And they are using local, they are using their own receivers to receive the signals and demodulate by the process of squaring. By the process of squaring the received signal waveform by taking its absolute value. So the codeless techniques are mostly used by the commercial users for some specific reasons. Because the SNR is so small, the SNR of the recovered carrier will be reduced by as much as 33 decibels because the squaring of the signal greatly increases the noise power related to that of the signal. The squared signal has extremely small bandwidth so that the narrowband filtering can make up the difference. So codeless techniques are also existing. Why? To take the burden of high frequency and down conversion. All these things are eliminated in the commercial receivers. Few commercial receivers, not all the commercial receivers, few commercial receivers. Of course, selective availability signals we have learned enough time. So selective availability is what? The process of making the availability to the signals only in specified directions, and in other directions that will be nullified because the other enemies will try to send some unwanted signals to disturb the receivers, intended receivers. So that the selective availability technique is implemented here. Of course, this was withdrawn in the year 2000. Earlier stages it was there, but later it was withdrawn. And differential capability. So what is differential capability? Differential capability is nothing but using the information from the local receivers, and those receivers are called as the reference receivers. In addition to a single receiver, intended original receiver, it has to take the information from the local receivers with a known location, for the purpose of pseudo range measurement. And some of the errors that are common to both the receivers is selective availability error. Of course, we know because of introduction of the selective availability, it will cause some error that is around 30 meters. And ionospheric delays, because the signal has to travel to the ionosphere molecules, so it will provide some, it will induce some ionospheric delays. The receiver must be able to calculate them and reject them. Proper correction is to be done. And other one is tropospheric delays, when the signal is traveling through the tropospheric region, and that will also induce some errors. This is around 1 to 3 meters range. The ionospheric delay is around 3 to 6 meters. This is more. And ephemeris errors. If there is any mismatch of the orbital rotation of the satellite is carried by the navigation message signal, then that will also result in a error that is around 3 meters. That is around 3 meters or less than 3 meters. See, the satellites are revolving in the elliptical orbits, right? In elliptical orbit around the Earth. If the proper orbital information and inclination is not carried by the navigation message signal, then that will lead to some error. That error is called as the ephemeris error. Of course, most important is the satellite clock error. I'm sorry. So satellite clock errors is, there is always a mismatch from the UTC that is used by the satellites, that is universal coordinated time, and the atomic clock time of the GPS receiver. And because of this, we have to provide the enough offsets. So always there is a difference between the actual satellite clock and the predicted, that is predicted by the satellite data. So this will also cause some error. Then the differential capability is it should able to correct the errors. So of course the correction is done in the two domains. One is the measurement domain and other one is the solution domain. The GPS corrections of the errors is done in the two domains. One is the measurement domain and another one is the solution domain. So what is measurement domain? In the measurement domain, the corrections are determined for pseudo-range measurements to each satellite in view of the reference receiver, and the user simply applies the corrections corresponding to the satellites the roving receiver is observing. The roving receiver means the intended receiver, whatever it is observing. The corrections are determined for the pseudo-range measurements to each satellite separately. So whatever the errors, whether it is a ephemeris error or clock error or ionospheric error, whatever the source of error is there, it will be done individually. That means for each satellite. And the other one is the solution domain. In the solution domain, the reference station computes the position error that results from the pseudo-range measurements to a set of satellites, and this is applied as a correction to the user's computed position. So a significant drawback to the solution domain approach is that the user and reference station must use exactly the same set of satellites if the position correction is to be valid. So the measurement domain, the corrections are done to each specific satellite individually. But in the solution domain, a set of satellites are taken into consideration and the corrections are done to that. So here in the solution domain, there must be, those two must use the same set of satellite and same set of reference stations. If they are not matching, then the corrections made or corrections proposed are becoming erroneous again. So always the measurement domain is better one. And in most of the cases, the reference station does not know which satellites can be received by the roving receiver, and therefore would have to transmit the position corrections for many possible sets of satellites. See, if it is doing for a set of satellites, and if the for which signal, from which satellite the signal is coming, if it is not known by a roving receiver, then it has to do for a set of satellites continuously. It is a waste of time and waste of computational energy also, right? And real-time versus post-processed corrections. In some applications like surveying, mostly used by the surveyors, that is civil engineers, it is not necessary to obtain the differentially corrected position solutions in the real time. In these applications, it is common practice to obtain the corrected positions at a later stage by bringing together the recorded data from both the receivers. And here, no reference to user data link is necessary if the recorded data from both the receivers can be physically transported to a common computer for processing. So mostly in the surveying technique, on the time corrections are not done. Of course, they are done after post-processing. So all these things are carried to a master control station, and at the master control station, after collecting, the correction procedure is implemented or applied. Pseudo satellite compatibility. Yes, this is very, very good topic. So what is pseudo satellite? It is not a satellite. It is a pseudo satellite because it is also generating a GPS like signal. It is also generating a GPS signal, GPS like signal, such that the GPS receiver will confuse. The GPS receivers will confuse between the original GPS signal and the pseudo satellite signal. So a receiver must have a capability to reject the pseudo satellite, signal. So this will be decided by the good satellite geometry. This will be decided by the good satellite geometry. And of course, this is called as the Precision, dilution of precision. Of course, in the another PPT, I will show that with the diagrams. Here it is not mentioned, no problem. So pseudo satellite is one, the intentionally they will induce some GPS like signals to confuse the receiver for a false navigation calculations, so that the receiver must be able to reject such pseudo satellites. So the major improvements that are offered in the pseudolights are improvement in the geometry, that is vertical dilution of precision and horizontal dilution of precision should be exactly optimal, that is good geometry should be there, and improvement in the signal availability should be improved, and inherent transmission of the differential corrections, and self-contained failure notification. If there is a failure of this process is going on, and that should be alarmed, that should be intimated, and solution of the signal blockage problems. If there is any signal blockage is there, that should be solved on the time. And the pseudo satellite structure, it is also looks like a C/A code. That's why it is looking like a GPS signal. And pseudolight characteristics. First, pseudolight identification. You should have a clear-cut identification. It is using for that purpose a unique gold code, and there should be a clock offset, and transmitted signal power. It is working up to 50 kilometers, and with approximately 30 milliwatts of signal power. And message structure is almost looking like a navigation message structure. Same 50 bits per second data stream is used to confuse the receivers. And there should be minimum physical spacing of the pseudolights. If the minimum physical spacing is not there, then they will interfere with each other. Then separation of the pseudolights should be there. For that purpose, we use two techniques, that is using different codes and using the same codes. And this is the minimum distance that is to be pseudolight A and pseudolight B. From its coverage, it should be at a distance of 12 kilometers. It should be at a distance of 12 kilometers, so that the separation between them will be 54 kilometers, and their coverage separation will be around 30 kilometers. And here we will use the wideband pulse clipping for the separation of the signals. So this is the zone of overlap, but should be avoided. I think you have already drawn this diagram, and I'm explaining the unit 3. Right. And receiver designed for the pseudo satellite compatibility. And because the receiver must continuously recover the pseudolight data message, and a channel must be dedicated to these tasks. For this reason, a single channel slow sequencing receiver could not be used, and this is really not a problem, since almost all the modern receivers are coming with the multi-channel receivers. And the receiver must have ability to track the pseudolight gold codes. Whatever the pseudo satellites are using, they must have the ability to track them and receive them. And reduction of the pseudo satellite interference to GPS signal channels. So GPS signals are there and pseudo satellites signals are there. So they must be separated. Of course, they are widely separated from each other. Just now we have seen. And the ability to receive overlapping pseudolight pulses. Sometimes the pseudolight pulses are like coming like overlapping. Then the receiver must be able to receive them. And there are some receivers which are called as the non-participating receivers. A receiver that is not designed to receive the pseudolight signal is called as a non-participating receiver. It must be designed so that a pseudolight signal which might be 60 decibels stronger than a satellite signal will not interfere with the latter. So whoever purchases of a non-partial receiver would be well advised to obtain assurances of the immunity to jamming the pseudolites. Pseudolites sometimes are not used and they are called as a non-participating receivers. So whoever purchases this non-participating receiver, they must ensure that if the signal strength is more than 60 decibels, that is more than the intended GPS receiver, it must be able to reject them. Right? And external aiding inputs include INS aiding, that is inertial navigation system aiding, and aiding with additional navigation inputs, of course, from LORAN-C or vehicular wheel sensors and magnetic compasses. These are, of course, another types of navigation techniques. So these are external aiding inputs, which you have seen in our block diagram. Altimeter aiding, clock aiding for the better clock correction. These are the things. That is receiver design choices. Right, already 11:26. Okay. Then antenna design, of course, we have spent enough time. The antenna will be of patch type, dome type, blade type, and helical antennas. Helical or volute. 1, 2, 3, 4 types. Of course, this is a dome type. Patch type is already present. It will be attached to the receiver itself. Volute, it will take some space, blade, and null steering. And some array type antennas also required, because there should be capability of the selective availability. So for that purpose, we are going for the choke ring designs and phased array antennas for the capability of SA rejection and pseudolite signal capability reception. Right? Have you understood this? Are any doubts? Please respond, guys. Any doubts? So with this, the revision of Unit 3 is completed. Of course, there are errors topic is there. Errors already we have learned very recently in Unit 4. Of course, in brief, I have given what are the different types of error sources and how much error is caused due to each one and how to correct that also. So one is the GPS receivers and second one is the data errors, satellite almanac errors, ephemeris errors, clock errors, and thermal noise. Due to thermal noise also some error will be induced. These are the data error sources. Right. Thank you for today.